All right. So it's about 3:30, and we are talking about performance. It's at the end of the session, and it's very symbolic that we are talking about performance at the end. That's generally when we think about performance. So what I want to talk about today, initially, I was thinking, if you look at the title, it's Debug Performance with SPX. And I wanted to discuss how to debug, and the nitty-gritty geeky details of how to optimize MySQL queries and stuff like that. But last 15 days, when I talk to developers, I've realized I must first convince you to install SPX. I must first talk about why SPX. And before we dig into this, there are 3 takeaways from this particular talk. Yeah? Sorry. I'm Abhishek, and I am performance engineer at Graas. And these are the So what happened right now is I had an old PPT which talked more about the technical details and how to debug. But this one is revamped version in last 2 days, which focuses on a recent incidents that happened. Yeah. So profiling tools must be open source and free. That's what I believe. For example, right now, the open source profilers that are available, New Relic, be it Blackfire, they're all paid. And I believe it's essential that there should be a open source tool which helps you to profile. Now, the second thing is, I see that a lot of developers don't have access to these tools, so we guess a lot of times. And that should be clear when I talk about the incidents. And then all performance optimization is about getting rid of the feature that you're not using. The reason to talk about that is today I was talking to a lot of people, and they kept mentioning how performance optimization takes time. And frankly, it's a myth. And that's what I would like to clarify today. So before I get into this, let me tell you about a recent incident that happened. So I have a friend who runs a B2B business, okay? And now we got to talk, and he said, you know what, my checkout is really slow. Apparently, he started receiving complaints from his customer that order placement flow is very slow. And I said, okay, tell me more. He said, I wanted to fix this. I gave it to my developer, and he said, I can't reproduce the problem on my local. So it's probably your server problem. Can you double your server capacity? He just did that. Absolutely no effect on checkout performance. Then basically, he went back to the developer. He said, my SRE guy said that the server utilization is okay. It's not under load. Then what's the problem? So the developers looked at the code base. They said, you know what, you have 50 plus extensions installed. It's normal for Magento to be slow. He said, okay, but how do you fix it? So the developer said, you know what, can we get New Relic, please? He said, okay, how much will New Relic cost me? And at that point, the developer said, it depends on your data. The customer got really confused. He said, data, I only have 30K SKUs. And the developer said, no, not your 30K SKUs, the data that you send them. At this point, it led to a lot of confusion. So for people who have used New Relic, you know that New Relic charges you by the amount of traces that you send to New Relic, right? And the customer had no way of knowing what the developer meant. It led to confusion, and confusion leads to inaction. So nothing happened. Then later, some people told him that Magento open source is slow when you add 30, 40 items in your cart and you try to check out. And what happened next was he started Googling, my Magento website is slow. And you know what happens when you do that? You find more evidence for your website being slow, and eventually Magento being slow. And this is a sad story. And then when he narrated this to me, I said, how much time does your checkout take to load? What do you mean by slow? And he said, just to load the page, it takes 7 seconds. Okay, I got curious. 7 seconds to load the page? Can I take a look, please? I'm curious. How's that happening? All I need is your code base and your database, cleaned up version of your database. I don't want any customer details, just the number of records. He gave me his database code base. I set it up on my local. And this is what I did. Now, I would like to take you through my thought process and how I used SPX. So, are you guys with me? Yeah? Okay. So first, what is SPX? SPX is a simple PHP extension that allows you to profile with a great profiling UI that helps you to profile. So can I just get a raise of hands for people who have done profiling with, say, Blackfire? Yeah, okay, a few. People who have access to New Relic. Okay, a lot of people have access to New Relic. The developers that I worked with, a lot of developers, didn't have access to these tools. And second thing is, I'll get to the problems you start facing when you start relying on New Relic. Okay, so here it is. This is my local UI. You can see this is my SPX panel. The domain there is magento.to, which is my local. This is how I set up the website. And just with that additional parameter, I'm able to access this SPX control UI on my local. How do I profile? Simple. I just enable it. And then there are some advanced options that I will talk in the second half. I set the sampling to 1 ms. I'll get into the details. And that's it. Now, first thing I do is I want to reproduce the problem, because without that, I can't debug it, right? So I take exact same code, database, I log in, I add 30, 40 items to my cart, and I reload the checkout. And here's what I see. I can see it's taking 7 seconds. So in that moment, I'm sure that in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to find the problem. And here's the profile. You see the profile? Now, ignore the black text and everything. Here, when I look at this profile, what I am focusing on is these 5 blocks, 5 red blocks. Green means fast, greener is faster, and red is slow. So that's all I'm looking at. Now, what I'm doing is I'm going to zoom in on any of these blocks, and this is what I see. And this payment gateway is quite used. It's open source code, so if you're curious, you can go and look into the code base. But this is what you'll see. Now, what is this? Payment gateway get total initial fee for takes 610 milliseconds, right? What is happening? Now, at this point, I zoom in on each block, and this is the mental picture I have. After having collected the information, in next 5 minutes, this is what I see. Checkout load takes get payment fee for items, calls, database quite a few times, 40 times, apparently. That tells me how number of items are affecting performance. Then second, I see get saved cards, does a remote call for some reason, and then retrieve customer from gateway, there is one more call, and then this is the weird part. Looks like some caching is missed. But anyways, at this point, I'm absolutely sure that I can bring down the response time to significantly lower. Now, what do I do? The first thing I want to do is I want to talk to my customer or my client or anybody who I'm consulting to, and I want to give them estimates. so that they know that the performance issue has been found and how much time will it take me. So should I dig into the code immediately? Nah, not really. First, important questions. Are you using get saved cards? That's when I log into his admin panel and I check, are you using hosted checkout or are you using redirection based checkout? The reason to ask these questions is all optimizations are about finding features that you are not using and getting rid of them, right? Those features can be non-functional, like reusability is also a feature of your code. Extensibility is also feature of your code, and these features come at a performance cost. So the first thing is, I look at the business, and I say, okay, you're not using get saved cards. And that is taking around, those 2 calls are taking more than 3 seconds. That's it. In first 4 hours, I can just get rid of those calls and I can do that optimization. And then get payment fee for items. I can go into the code, and if I wanted to fix this at the framework level, I can say, okay, you know what? Let's optimize the query. But right now, the first question I'm asking is, are you using product-based payment fees? The client said no. At this point, it became quite clear that I could reduce the response time to 1 second. But now there is this call, retrieve customer from gateway, and sorry, that slide isn't here. Retrieve customer from gateway. Now this is where it was tricky. This was apparently in some constructor dependency, and a simple proxy pattern wasn't going to fix it. So with this analysis, I went back to the person I was consulting to, and I said, you know what? These saved cards features are taking around 2 seconds. The other feature is taking 1 more second. And then there's this feature that's taking around 1 second. I can reduce the response time to 1 second by today. I can bring down the response time from 7 seconds to 1 second by today end of the day. And this will probably take me 1 more day. Please just give me 1 more day to do impact analysis of my code change that I'm about to do. Now I understand this is a simple use case, and it's not some brilliant performance optimization. But what I'm trying to say here is, if my other friends, my other developers had access to SPX on their local machine, this probably would not take 2 months. It could have been much faster. They could have responded in a quicker fashion. Now, this is the process that I explained, right? Profile with production-like data with SPX, then identify top 5 slow functions. I make a list. I just don't go around the profile. Top 5 functions that I want to optimize. Then identify features associated with that particular code. You want to know that. Can I get rid of that feature? And then the features can be extensibility, reusability, and this is the time-consuming part of the code. Then do impact analysis, push code changes, and most importantly, profile again and get some proof. I did this process, and I was able to get the whole response time down to 800 milliseconds from 7 seconds in an effort of 2 days. I think that's pretty good. It's easy, but the solution was very simple. Check if saved cards is being used. Check if customer retrieval from payment gateway was done in a constructor, and use a proxy pattern, a variation of that. And then payment fee per product was not being used, so I got rid of it. Now I'm going to send these patches back to the payment gateway, but these issues shouldn't have been there in the first place. I believe the reason these issues keep slipping from us developers, despite our good intent, is because performance is always an afterthought after we have pushed the code. And if you're doing this with New Relic, and if you do a lot of performance optimization, what you will realize is when you eliminate one call, some other call will show up because you accidentally disabled some caching. So in those cases, you need fast feedback loop, and that's why you need a tool on your local machine, not on the server. And let me show you 3 slides, and you tell me in which case is performance optimization most likely to happen. Yeah? So, yeah, this is what I was talking about. I could have done these optimizations with New Relic, Datadog. That's what you would believe, right? But this is the first code snippet. Tell me in which case would I get into the if condition most likely. Most likely. The first is try optimizing performance, but it is in conjunction of these 5 AND statements. The developer the client must be willing to pay for the license fee. Then if the developer I'm working with is a contractor, my company is not going to buy a license for them, right? Then, if you don't frequently profile, you're not going to be able to quickly read the profile when you need it. Then, if you have New Relic on the server, you still need server access, right? Which means I can't delegate it to somebody else. Then some people ask me, but can't you use Magento's internal profiler? Magento also has a built-in profiler. Yeah, I mean, yes, I can use it, but if you have checked out their UI, it's just non-existent, or it's a simple CSV thing. And then there are other problems, like it doesn't work when the timeout happens, or it doesn't work when a fatal error happens. So Magento profiler, inbuilt profiler, while 2 years ago I was using it, then I started using XHProf, but I always found it difficult. Then this is the simple case. Do you have SPX installed on your local? If you have it, I just showed you generating a profile is as quick as reloading your page. That's it. Now, with that, 2 years ago, I found SPX online. It's still not popular. It's a brilliant tool. It competes with all other, enterprise-grade tools out there. There is one more benefit. If you have access to your profiling data, because the whole profile data sits on your local, you can build tools on top of that. For example, the UI I showed you wasn't like this, not exactly like this, because I customized the whole look and feel to my needs. This is what the real profiler, when you install it, will look like. Yeah. Now, the important thing here, before I get into the complicated optimization problem, is I couldn't find this guy on the internet, Sylvan L. somebody, right? But for 2 years, I've been using this extensively to profile and optimize. So when you install this on your local and find this useful, please buy him a coffee and show him that you appreciate it, because you're going to love the experience. Yeah, and that's thank you part 1. Thank you for people who have stuck around. And now we'll get into the boring technical details. Yeah. So what is it that we want to do now? We want to optimize a PL product listing page that without caching, right? If you disable the caching, it right now takes 2 seconds. And Magento open source 2.4.6 with Luma theme, that's what I have installed on my local machine, with 1.3 million SKUs. A lot of them are configurable SKUs. And as I mentioned, the response time when I measured it was 1.6 seconds without cache. That's important. And then what we want to do is we want to bring down the performance to 600 milliseconds. Yeah? Now, let's do that with SPX before you profile. There are some rules that you should follow before profiling. And those rules are turn on production mode. You don't want to unnecessarily find issues that you find on developer mode. Then second is generate composer class map using dump autoload -o. This is very often missed on production for some reason. What I have seen is people do composer dump autoload and they forget the flag -o. And you say, okay, what's the big difference? The difference is of 300 milliseconds. It cuts down your request time by 300 milliseconds if you just use that flag, because it generates the class map and it reduces the file system lookups. Then keep your op cache and PHP settings same as production. Have large amount of data, because that's when you will be able to find the issues. And disable full page cache, because at this point we are looking at optimizing the performance, right, without the cache. Because when people do filtering or say searching, the cache is not going to be useful. So that's what you want to do, right? And if you have Xdebug, disable it. Yeah, this was that fact that I mentioned just a minute ago. And this is the profile of the product listing page that you see. Now, when I look at this profile, follow my thought process. It is, I'm looking at these blocks. Yeah, there is a big red block there, and then there are a lot of small repetitive block. The width of the column tells you how much time a particular snippet of code is taking, and the depth of the column tells you how deep is the call stack. Both affect performance. And sometimes you want to optimize this. Composer dump autoload, by the way, optimizes the vertical length, the depth of the column. And width is what you want to optimize by optimizing either database queries or giving away the reusability. And we'll see what that is in this case. Now, these repetitive blocks, when I zoom in, I can see that these blocks are price rendering logic, swatch rendering logic, and stock checks. These are making repetitive queries to the database. So now the question is, okay, how do I optimize this? And why are these doing repetitive queries to the database? Here, why is always important, because your impact analysis and your analysis of what are you going to trade off depends on answer to the why question. So here's what I did. You can see that the category, I'll get to how I did it, but you can see it, category page 5, it was initially taking 2.41 seconds when I profiled and I flushed the cache. And then in the disabled cache state, I iteratively brought it down to 623 milliseconds. Now this is very useful on production, especially under load. Yeah. So how do we do that? Now, I have zoomed in a little bit, and you can see that the product list.phtml is was slow. This is the profile I took after optimization. So let me go back. Profile before optimization, and this is profile after optimization. Yeah. What you can see is this particular column, the width has decreased. And this is the profile of 600 milliseconds. Yeah. So how did I do that? How did I reduce the width of these columns? Essentially, how are these green again? Now, this is my mental map of that profile that I showed you. Application run, render layout, product listing template, and you can see swatch rendering logic is repeatedly it's calling the database repeatedly. Now, here's the issue. To get the price, Magento uses a resolve price function which queries the database to get all the tiered pricing, special pricing, and everything. IsSellable check does one more query to the database to get the stock information. Get used products is used to fetch the child products. every single time. For each card, it will do get used products. So if you, and each child products of equal prices, this is, amusing because it takes a lot of time, and all this is used for is this as low as label. Whether to show this label or not, for that, it will do that. These 4 functions, as I said, the next step is to list down the 5 functions. These are the slow functions. And now if I decide to show 36 products on my page, these will be called 36 times. That is the repetition. And that's slow. So how do we optimize this? What we want to do is we want to load all of this data before, we want to use singular query to load all of this data. So here's the strategy. Figure out what data you need to preload. Yeah. Second thing is find event to trigger this preloading. Yeah. And profile again. So wrap original method call. Basically, we want to bypass the original method that's calling the database again and again, and then profile again. So yeah, find out what data needs to be preloaded. In this case, we are very clear. We want to preload stock, price, and child products. Yeah. And then as soon as configurable product collection is loaded, there's this particular method called get loaded collection. You just want to write an after plugin that would do the trick. Yeah. And once you do that, we need to bypass the original method call. How do you do that? Sometimes you may want to do it with an around plugin, and sometimes you may want to do it with an after plugin. It depends. In this case, I had to write 4 plugins to bypass those 4 function calls, and this is approximately what it looks like. Yeah, I have a around resolver price plugin. I had to write 2 plugins for price, and then there is this configurable swatch loader and configurable sellable plugin. All of this code is going to be available in the GitHub. The code is huge, so I will not be explaining it in detail. But this whole concept of preloading has been there since 2020. A guy named Ivan, he wrote a framework to do this in a repetitive way. And that's this product data preloader. You can visit this repository. Now, please don't just install this and expect your performance to improve. That doesn't happen. This gives you a framework. You have to write the loaders. That's what you have to do. But that's product data preloader. You can use it. We have been using it in our production environments. And this reduces the response time significantly. You can bring down your response time to 600, 700 milliseconds, and that's a lot of improvement. He's that guy. If you don't know him, very inspiring. Follow all of his content. And that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here.